We're not going to look at giant ants today. I'd like to, but it's a horrible. I actually saw this movie, and it's terrifying. I saw it when I was a kid, and yeah, it's where ants become, the size of buses. It's terrifying. We're going to look at something more terrifying today than giant ants. We're going to look at this thing that we call betrayal, and because in this passage where we are in Mark is where Jesus is betrayed, and it's like who spends their time looking in the Bible about betrayal? Like so we can be better betrayers? No. But there's a fascinating human insight when you look at betrayal. So we're going to look today, as we look at betrayal, we're going to look at what I call 5 shades of betrayal. There are going to be 5 things we're going to look at. And they're going to tell you something about betrayal and something more insightful about your heart than you might expect as we look at betrayal. Because you know these events we're going to read today. It's the betrayal of Jesus. But there's betrayal on several levels. So I'm going to look at 5 different things about betrayal. And we're going to just think aloud a little bit. You're going to have to do a little thinking as well about what betrayal is telling you about yourself in the process. So I started looking at this week, since this is the betrayal week in Mark's gospel, I started looking at dictionaries. So I looked at this dictionary. This is the Merriam-Webster dictionary about what is when you betray someone. And it says, it's a transitive verb, to lead astray. Thanks, that's not very helpful. To deliver to an enemy by treachery. Okay, that's a little better. Down the list, there's to fail or desert, especially in time of need, like he betrayed his family, or to reveal unintentionally, to betray one's true feeling. That's what we're talking about. I didn't like a lot of those definitions, so I went to another dictionary, which you can do online. So I went instead to the Oxford Advanced American Dictionary, not just the Oxford American Dictionary, the Oxford Advanced Dictionary. Yeah, so here you go. Well, let's, to betray. Well, to give information about someone or something to the enemy. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. But to betray somebody or something, to hurt someone who trusts you. Okay, now we're getting there. Especially not being loyal or faithful to them. Okay, that's good. We're closer. The third one, this one really rang my bell. Betray something to ignore your principles or beliefs in order to achieve something or gain an advantage for yourself. Okay. We're going to get closer to that because that's what we're going to see displayed today in Mark. To tell someone or make them aware of a piece of information, a feeling, to betray something. Okay, so that gets me started. But even still, as I'm thinking about betrayal, I'm thinking, I don't totally understand. I know when it happens because it's horrible when it happens. In fact, just to kind of kick us off right now, I betrayed a kid when I was in 3rd grade. And to this day, it hurts me that I did this. I'll even tell you his name, Mitchell Lynch. I can remember maybe 3 of my classmates' names in 3rd grade, but I remember Mitchell Lynch because I betrayed him. And what happened was Mitchell had moved into our neighborhood in the middle of the school year. And of course, kids that come in the middle of the school year, they're kind of outsiders. It's hard for them to get incorporated in 3rd grade. Well, he happened to be right on the route that I walked to school. And by the way, I walked 1.5 miles to school uphill in the snow every day. So, but yeah, we did walk a long ways, but I walked past his house. He was in my class, so I figured, I ran into him a couple times as I was going into school, so I thought I should make a friend of him. Well, come to find out, his dad was in the military, which is why he'd moved around a lot. That's why he came in the middle of the school year. And so Mitchell and I would walk to school together all through 3rd grade. But Mitchell had this weird tooth. Your 2 teeth, like right here. The left front tooth he had right here was black. So, and partially cracked on the bottom. So I think that's why it's black. If you know anything about dentistry, help me out here. But it was cracked on the bottom, so it was missing a piece of the bottom of the tooth, and it caused the tooth to die, so his tooth was black, but it hadn't fallen out. So every time he smiled, he'd go, oh, gee, it was bad looking. So, of course, when he goes into 3rd grade with me, the first time he smiles in front of the people in the 3rd grade class, they make fun of him, right? Well, I said, it's okay, Mitchell. They'll like you. You're a nice guy. Everything will be fine. We went on a couple of months. He had a hard time incorporating with the kids. I decided to be his helper and walk by his side every day to 3rd grade. I felt like I was doing such a marvelous thing, loving Mitchell. And actually, I came to like Mitchell a lot. He was a really nice guy. It just dawned on me, he might watch this online someday. This is his real name. So people are searching on the internet right now. But one day we were in class, and the teacher said, I need to go down to the principal's office just for a couple of minutes. you all behave yourself. Here's an assignment. Work on this while I'm out of the room. Of course, you know what happens when the teacher leaves the room, right? So this havoc starts to come out. Well, what they start to do is very vocally and very brutally make fun of Mitchell Lynch in the class. They've been storing this up since the day they saw him, right? And I can see this like a video in my mind. I can see them. One kid was standing on his chair and pointing at Mitchell across the room and then talking about his black tooth and his black family. And he wasn't black. He was white like me ethnically. But I mean, everything about his life was black because his tooth was black. Just making fun of him. And they were laughing. And I looked down at Mitchell, and of course, his head, he's just looking at the floor. He's not reacting at all. And this thing builds to a momentum. And then I joined them. And the minute that I joined them and started saying really brutal things about Mitchell, his head came up from the floor, it pivoted around, and he looked at me. And that still hurts. That still hurts. I didn't walk with Mitchell anymore in that third grade year. And we'd run into each other as I'd walk up Inwood Avenue there in Silver Spring, and I'd walk up there and I'd see him, and he would walk faster or slower. He'd avoid me. It was like that was just the end. Our friendship was busted irretrievably. It was done. And at the end of third grade, his family moved again and left, and we never rectified things. And to this very day, that hurts. And at the time, as a third grader, I mean, how old are you in third grade? You're like 8? You would think this would just roll off your back. But here I am much older, and it still hurts tremendously. And I asked myself then, and I ask myself now, why do we betray people? I mean, really, when we see how ugly it is, when we know the personal cost to ourselves, why do we betray people? And that's what I want to answer as we look at this section on betrayal today. We're capable of betrayal, but what is it all about? And again, if you look at this passage as we look at it, and you see the betrayal that's going to go on, if you're thinking, well, it's a good thing I don't do that, hold your horses. Yeah. So let's take a look at betrayal today. Let's see if I can get a leg up on this. And by the way, before I jump into it, if you're watching Mitchell, I'm really sorry. That was 60 years ago. Okay, here we go. Mark 14 is where we are. This is the Passion Week. This is just before Jesus gets arrested. He'll get arrested today. So that's what's going on as we're here. So we're in Mark 14, verse 26. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. They were in the upper room. Remember that last week? And they're having the Passover / the Lord's Supper up there. They left that. They came out of Jerusalem. They headed east out of the walled Jerusalem, down the Kidron Valley, which runs up the eastern side of Jerusalem, and into a place where there's a grove of olive trees. To this very day, when you go to Israel, there's olives in that same spot. There's olive trees. Really old, gnarly, really old olive trees. So they go there because it's a place they'd been many times before. They went out to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away, for it's written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered." All fall away. And then he goes on, "But after I'm raised up, I'll go before you to Galilee." What does that mean? Well, he's been telling them that he's going to be crucified and that he's going to raise from the dead after that. They should be connecting this right here. But what he's saying is that you're all going to leave me, but we'll get back together up in Galilee. Really? Do you see how kind of odd that is? Okay, so we'll be scattered, but we'll get together in Galilee. And Peter said, "Look, even though they all fall away, I will not." Ooh. He didn't say that ooh part, but that's what I put that. So he boldly stands up and says, "I won't, not me, I'll never fall away." And Jesus said to him, "Well, truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times. 3 times, not just once. But he said emphatically, if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And they all said the same thing. So before you get really harsh on Peter, they all said that. Peter just was the spokesman for what they were all thinking. Jesus says you're all going to leave. You're going to scatter. You're going to go away. It's going to be the fulfillment of prophecy, where they take down the shepherd, the sheep will scatter. You're all going to run away. And Peter says, "Not me. Even if I have to die, I will not do that." And they all said that. Well, of course, we've read the story, and we know where this goes. And Peter does exactly what Jesus says. He denies him 3 times. Not just once, 3 times. We'll get to that actual story next week. Okay, so I'm going to keep a score here about betrayal. I'm going to make notes. This is how I made notes as I'm thinking through this betrayal stuff. So here Jesus is actually predicting the betrayal that's going to happen, that we know happens. We've read the story. This betrayal is really going to happen. And it's not just going to be accidental. Peter will deny who Jesus is 3 times. 3 times he will not admit that he's with Jesus. So it impressed me as I'm looking at this, the fact, one aspect on these shades of betrayal is the fact that betrayal is something that you're really not self-aware of. You're not self-aware that you could actually do this. It seems so unthinkable that you could ever do this. And for Peter and the apostles, all of them, they're totally unaware that this is a possibility in their hearts, that they could do this. They proclaim their loyalty to Jesus and say, even if I have to die. So it's fascinating to me, even as I introduced the whole betrayal topic this morning, many of you were thinking, well, it's a good thing I don't do that. But as you read the passage, you realize you're very capable of doing it, even when everything in your consciousness tells you you're not going to do it. You will. Really? Yeah. You can, but will you? Well, no, I'm a pretty good person. I would never really betray somebody. Well, let's hold that thought for a second, because what we're seeing right here is the fact that you may not be self-aware of the fact that you're capable and willing and probably will betray people. Well, we're all fallen. We all have sin that's part of our lives. So it will lurk around the background. But I want better definition on this. I would prefer, when we talk about betrayal, I would prefer to be self-aware of where I could or couldn't, or where I would be tempted to. I want more definition on this. So we'll keep pushing through and get some more tips on betrayal, because it's very disturbing to me to think that I would not only be capable, but actually desire to betray somebody. That's because betrayal is so darn ugly. I mean, it is just ugly. So let's just hold on to this for a second. You may not be really the best judge of your ability nor your willingness to betray. Let's just hold on that for a second. Let's keep going, because there's more betrayal in this sequence. Let's go to the second scene right here. If we go on to verse 32. So they went to a place called Gethsemane. That's the Garden of Gethsemane, where all the olive trees are. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." So this is the famous scene where Jesus prays before the crucifixion. "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be greatly distressed and troubled. Greatly distressed. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch." First time I ever read that phrase about remain here and watch, I'm thinking, like, watch for what? Like, maybe watch for Judas and the guys are going to come arrest him? I mean, watch. Well, just keep reading. You'll see what the watch is all about. Going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And this is a fascinating thing, because we read, remember, when we started into Mark, we said we have 3 big questions. And the 3 big questions is, who is Jesus? Why did he come? And what does he demand of the followers who want to follow him? And why he came, the second question was answered in Mark 8. Mark 8 answers actually all 3 questions in sequence and in order. So if you don't know the answer to those questions, look into Mark 8. You'll find it. They're right there in a nutshell. But he said he came to die. So if he knows that he came to die, then why is he asking this? Isn't that interesting? But I think when we understand that Jesus is both fully human and fully divine, fully man, fully God, the man part of him is saying he knows what's ahead. And it's very troubling to him. It would be troubling to you or me as well. He knows this is his destiny. He knows this is why he is born. But even still, when it gets close, you're shaken to the roots, and he's shaken right here. And he asks if this hour might pass from him. But he said, "Abba, Father." The Abba is the daddy form of Father. "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." And at that point, he says, "I know what's coming. If there's an option not to do this, I would go for that. But let's go with Father with what you want." That's what we're doing. That's why I'm here. That's why I was born. So even though he emotionally is troubled by the knowledge of what's coming, he willfully says, "But Father, I'll do the plan. Here we go. I'll do the plan." So he came and he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, hey, Simon, why are you asleep? Couldn't you watch 1 hour watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. And there's the answer to our watch question. What do you want to watch for? The guys are going to come arrest Jesus? No, you need to watch because Satan's on the prowl tonight in a way you can't even close to imagine. You just don't know. You need to watch that you may not enter into temptation. This moment in the garden, the arrest, is like a collision of spiritual battles of huge proportions. And what he's saying to Peter and James and John is, you guys need to pray that you don't succumb to what's happening tonight, because this is big stuff is going down. Watch and pray for yourselves. That's what he's saying right here. Big stuff going down. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. One of the most famous phrases in the New Testament that's used this very day in public. People don't know anything about this story, but they know that line. Spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. They want to do what he's asking, but physically they're just failing. In a sense, they're betraying his question, his desire for them. Stay up with me and watch for a while. And they're going, I can't. It's a really soft kind of betrayal. Again, he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again, he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they didn't know what to answer him. Why are you guys sleeping? Well, I don't know what to say. And he came a third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It's enough. It's enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. So this scene right here is an interesting kind of soft betrayal, because Jesus asked them to do something very important on probably the most important day of Jesus' life, and they just couldn't stay awake. It's a physical problem, to be sure. I mean, they're tired and it's late at night. But still, when people fail us, and even if it's for an honest reason like we're tired or we're distracted or something, we still feel betrayed. There still is a although we say we're going to do one thing, we do another. So one thing you can take out of this, because this is a soft shade of betrayal, is the fact that oftentimes betrayal it accompanies weakness. If you're weak or you're tired or you can't keep your head straight, many times you betray your trust with other friends just because you're not capable of keeping your word, keeping the right thing. And I thought about this a lot this week because I could think of cases where I was extremely fatigued. And, people who I had said to them, I love you and I want to serve you this week and I want to do great stuff for you. In the end, I just failed them because I just ran out of gas. Now, is that willful? No, that's not willful. But the person who's betrayed still feels betrayed. So there's something about betrayal that seems to accompany weakness and fatigue. You go for the easier path. You go for what serves you rather than what serves them. Again, it's not willful, but it's just a different shade of betrayal because people still feel betrayed by that. What it made me think about is the fact is when I make a promise to someone to do something, what I need to do is clear out all those things that I know that will fatigue me or take me out of being able to fulfill my promise to them so they can trust me, and make sure that I don't put myself in a weak position where I will fail my promise to them. So it's a more proactive thing in terms of battling that. That's all I'm saying. But they will still feel betrayed, even though you just ran out of gas. Okay, that's another shade of betrayal. That's not quite as nasty, but we're getting to the nasty one. So let's take a look at this. 43, immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. So here comes the arrest. Middle of the night, totally black, it's dark, they're in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, okay, the one I will kiss is the man. Seize him, lead him away under guard. So that was the deal he made. So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, Rabbi, and kissed him. Rabbi, teacher, oh, great teacher. It's actually a term of great respect, great loyalty. You are my rabbi. You are my teacher. It's just nasty. Why did he have to say anything to Jesus? Why didn't he just kiss him? Oh, great teacher. Arrest him. This is where betrayal gets extraordinarily ugly. And then Mark goes on in verse 46 and they laid hands on him and seized him. Now, Mark left out some details in this. So what we do is we go back to some of the other Gospels and fill in some details. An interesting detail from Luke in this thing happens before they actually take him away. Luke 22:47, he drew near to Jesus, Judas did, to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? Ouch. Not only is the hypocrisy horrible about the rabbi title, but you're going to use a kiss, a way of brotherly affection for someone? And then in another gospel, when you look at John's gospel, John really does, he's the biggest on this. He really amplifies it. John 18:4, then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, who do you seek? And they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said to them, I'm he. Or literally, I am. Man, that rings toward back an old title of God in the Old Testament. And then John goes on. I didn't quote all of John, but basically the sequence is this, is that Judas comes up, kisses him to ID him, says, Rabbi, kisses him, and then Jesus takes the advantage and goes away from Judas and goes to the people that are with him and saying, who are you guys looking for? Looking for Jesus. Well, that's me. I am. And you know what happens right after that? You know John's gospel? Jesus is so proactive displaying who he is, who they're looking for. I'm the guy that as soon as he says, I am, they all fall backwards. They fall down. They fall down. And as they're getting back up again, Jesus does it again. So, who are you guys looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. Well, I am. And this time they have their composure. They don't fall on their backs, and they get up and they arrest them. They take them away. So that's the full picture of what's going on. John saw this. Maybe Matthew did not see it. Maybe Mark did not see this. So that you fill in the gaps. Luke wasn't there. He interviewed people to find out what happened. And you read all those together. You get all the Gospels together. You don't get conflict. You just get slightly different perspectives on the same event. You fill all the gaps together and you realize this is what happened. He comes. He kisses him, calls him rabbi. Jesus proclaims proactively to the team that's come with him with the swords and stuff, I'm the guy. They fall backwards. They get up off the bottoms. And he says it again, I'm the guy. Basically, take me. And at the end of the second time when Jesus does that, he says, go ahead and take me. Let these other guys go. And that's actually to fulfill a scripture that says that he didn't lose any of them. That's what it was all about. So that's the arrest. Now, one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. This is such a great scene. I mean, this is like in the movie version of this in my head, in Jim's movie in his head. I look at this and go, what? Now, the other Gospels give you more details, too. They name the servant. The servant's name is Malchus. Why do you name people in the New Testament when you do the stories? Because Malchus doesn't show up anywhere else for the rest of the Bible. So why bother naming him? One of the gospel writers decides it's important to name him. And many times our thinking, our guessing is that in the young early church after Jesus is raised and the church is moving along like in the book of Acts, that there were certain people in the original gospel stories that were showing up in the fellowships in the early church. So that it could have been, and this is just a total guess, it could have been that Malchus was known in those early fellowships. So that when they would hear the Gospel of Mark, or actually it's another gospel that mentions his name, they'd read that, and they'd hear that, and they'd say, the servant's name is Malchus, and people would say, Malchus? You mean that guy? They'd finger him. So they'd go and say, was that you? Well, yeah, that was me. So many times we think they named him so that they would be spotted in the early church. And they would say, well, yeah, that's what happened to me. I was there that night. These things happened. Yeah. And also one of the Gospels tells us that even though the ear was lopped off, it was lopped off on the wrong side of his head. What? Well, not like the front of his head, but one of the sides. And the clue is the fact that if you're right-handed, which most of them are, Peter most likely was right-handed. When he drew his sword, and he would come down on the head of Malchus, and he missed the center of his head and sliced down the side of his head. It's very likely that he would take off his left ear, but it says it was the other ear. So Peter's aim was so bad that not only did he, as he's coming from the side of his head that should have taken the ear off, he actually went past his head and took it off on the wrong side, did on the other side. It actually is a subtle clue of clumsiness, is what it's a clue of. One of the other Gospels tells us that Malchus's ear didn't stay on the ground. Jesus healed his ear. What? Now, if I was one of the arresting guys and I saw this happen, I'd say, I think I'm going to go home now. I don't think this is going to work out well tonight. Because if he can pick up that guy's ear and stick it on the side of his head and it's attached again, maybe we don't have enough swords and clubs. Just saying. I don't think many people saw this. That's why it's only mentioned in one gospel that it got put on. However, it raises a fantastic imaginary interaction between Malchus and the high priest. Now, this is totally imaginary, what I'm going to say. But can you imagine? Malchus is sent by the high priest that night in the middle of the night. Tell you what, Malchus, you go down there, make sure things go down right. Now, this is all imaginary, what I'm saying right now, but it's probably likely. You go down there, and Malchus, I want you to be my eyes and ears there tonight. Pretty bad, isn't it? But that's why Malchus is there. Malchus is not there to be a strong man. He's there to make sure things go down according to what the high priest wants to have happen. He wants Malchus to come back and tell him what went down, what's happening. And pretty soon the high priest will see Jesus himself when he's arrested. However, Malchus is there to be the eyes and ears. And so this is the imaginary part that I think is just fascinating to do. What if Malchus goes back to the high priest? And the high priest would ask him, so how'd it go tonight? Out there in the dark. Well, we got him. Now, this is all imaginary. This is why I just love going through this imagination. We got him. He's arrested. He's in custody. We got him. Okay, good. Anything out of the ordinary happen? Well, there was this guy with a sword, one of Jesus' guys. Oh, did he get killed? Well, no, he didn't get killed, but he drew his sword and he swung it once and he hit somebody. Well, did someone die? No, he didn't kill anybody. He wasn't really good with his sword. He probably was a fisherman. Those guys aren't very good with swords. Well, what happened? Did someone get hurt badly? Well, yeah, sorta. Well, who was it? Was it one of the temple guards? Was it one of the Romans? I mean, what happened? Well, no, it was me. and then the high priest, I'm making all this up. Do you know I'm making all this up? But I just love this scene. And then the high priest looks at him, and he might see blood on his robe, like around the shoulders or something, right? Maybe, I don't know. And he says, well, okay, but you look okay. Well, I lost a little blood, but yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Did he just smack you in the head? Well, no, he cut my ear off. What did you say? Yeah, he cut my ear off. But you have both of your ears. Well, that's another part of the story. I mean, it was black and it was dark and things were going on. There's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of torches and stuff like that. And Jesus said something to the guy who had the sword, stopped him from flaying his floor anymore. And then all of a sudden he leaned down on the ground, he picked up my ear and he stuck it back on my head. Can you see this scene? I loved it. This is my movie in my head for this. Because from that point on, for Malchus' entire life, he can point at his ear and said, this was off of my head. And that night when Jesus was arrested and was going to the cross, he picked it up off the ground and he stuck it back on my head. Jesus was so concerned and loved people around him that even while he was being arrested, he was concerned about healing my ear. What a testimony Malchus must have had. Now, I don't know if he had that interchange with the high priest. But man, that would be a great scene. Just saying. Also, too, Mark does not say who had the sword here. Part of the reason for that is we are pretty sure, a little speculation here, but we're pretty sure that Mark's gospel came from Peter's account of his firsthand witness of this. So if that's the case, then when Peter's mentioning this, he's going to say, well, Mark, before you write this down, I did pull out my sword and I lopped off this ear. And, it's just this kind of crazy stuff. Don't mention that was me. That could very well be the case why Peter's not mentioned, because he's mentioned in the other gospels. We know who did it. We don't know. Or maybe Mark's just being kind. He doesn't want to embarrass Peter more than he's been embarrassed through the entire New Testament. We don't know. But it's interesting that he won't mention Peter, because Peter's probably the eyewitness who gave him this information that Mark wrote down. Okay, let's move on. So Jesus says to him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs and to capture me? Because look, day after day, I was with you in the temple teaching and you didn't seize me. So what is this all about? Why do you think you have to come with swords and clubs? Really? I was at the temple unarmed. You could have done it any time then. Of course, we know as we read this account just in the last couple of weeks, they could have taken him. They wanted to take him. They plotted how to take him, but they realized that the response from the crowd, since he was so popular at the time, the response from the crowds would probably take the Pharisees down, so they didn't take him. They realized that they needed to deal with the crowd control issues. That's why they didn't take him. So they didn't, but now he does. And Jesus kind of rebukes them kind of in their cowardliness even. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. That is, let's let this go down the way the scriptures say it's going to go down. This is actually not unexpected. This isn't an accident in the cosmic sense from God. God knew exactly how this was going to go down, and it was prophesied how this would go down. So let the scriptures be fulfilled. And at that point, they all left him and fled. They all left him and fled. Okay, third point in this, and this is just the obvious one because this is really the center of the betrayal section we'll look at today. Betrayal is repulsively hypocritical. And that's what makes betrayal such an ugly thing. It's hypocritical because you state your faithfulness to somebody or their ability to trust you or your love for them or all these things that makes you think that they're on your side. And then what you do is you flip it and you go to the opposite. It's a contrast to what you say. You say one thing, you do another. That's hypocrisy. That's hypocrisy. But it's repulsive. I mean, even as we look at that, it's like, that is ugly. How can he go up and give a kiss to Jesus? How can he call him his rabbi? How can he have been following with him 3 years and then betray him like this? I mean, he was one thing and then he's another thing. It's just gross. It is totally gross. Betrayal is totally gross. Now, interestingly enough, there are in the world's cultures societies who elevate betrayal as a moral thing, as a clever thing. If you can get your enemy to trust you, think you'll be faithful to their interests, and then betray them at the last minute, good for you. Very clever on your part. No, but that's wrong. It's just totally wrong. It's just repulsively hypocritical. Let's do another shade. Let's go on in the story. Verse 51. A young man followed him. So remember we said just in the previous verse, everyone abandoned him. The 12 abandoned him. But there's this young guy. There's this young guy that's there. He decides that as Jesus is being led off captive with these guys with swords and torches, that he's going to follow him. The apostles didn't do that. This young man did. There's a follower that followed him after he got arrested. A young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body. And they seized him, which is exactly what you think they'd happen. They've got Jesus. They're going to seize anyone who's following him. Seize anyone who's following him. There's a kid. Seize the kid. So they seize him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. What? This is not mentioned in any of the other Gospels. And then what does it mean? And why is it here? And naked? And why is he wearing a tablecloth? Or whatever that is. What? Bible scholars for years have looked at this and smacked their heads and go, what? What? And there's been some speculative thinking about who this person is and why he's only wearing a tablecloth or a bed sheet. I don't know what it is. It's some big piece of cloth. And it's only speculation. But the best speculation I've heard is that this young man himself is Mark. That's the speculation that rolls. A lot of people go with that. Now, Mark is not absent from the rest of the Gospels. After all, he penned this Gospel, the same Mark. He also shows up in Asia Minor, in Turkey, when Paul and Barnabas are doing their trips in Acts and stuff like that. Mark shows up. He's also known as John, so he's called John Mark. But still, what is this? What is this? Well, here's the speculation. Take it or leave it. Don't pin me to the wall that this is true. But the speculation is this. They had just come from an upper room, and we don't know who owned that upper room. Many people speculate that it was owned by Mark's family. And then Mark was a young man at the time. I mean, maybe in his teens, something like that. And that as they left the upper room and there was commotion outside, Mark was just curious, and maybe he was sleeping. And so as they leave late at night from there, he wants to just kind of tag along and find out what's going on. He's so anxious to follow them once they leave the upper room that he doesn't even have time to get dressed. So he just takes the tablecloth that they're eating on just a minute before, I don't know, and follows them out to the Garden of Gethsemane. He's out there wrapped up in this one cloth. He's following and didn't have time to get dressed. So that's why he doesn't have clothes on underneath the tablecloth. And he's out there and he's watching what's going on. And oh, there's an arrest going on. Oh, and there's torches and there's swords. And oh, and all the apostles are going away. Well, I'm not going to go away. I'm going to follow Jesus. And they take Jesus away and they seize him. And he goes, I don't want to go get arrested. And he runs away and realizes that he just leaves the tablecloth in their hands and he's gone. That's the theory. We don't know if that's true or not. But if it is true, it adds some interesting dynamics to the accounts in Acts when John Mark shows up with Paul and Barnabas, because that means that he's an eyewitness that neither Paul nor Barnabas are that night. So as they travel across Asia Minor and they talk about Jesus and they talk about his arrest and they talk about his resurrection, it could very well be that Mark is there in Turkey, Asia Minor, with Barnabas and Paul, saying, yeah, I was there. Could be. We don't know. We just don't know. Also, John Mark has a kind of a negative against his name in Acts. And if you read Acts, you see what happens. Anyway, it's not really bad. Because at the end of one of Paul's letters, he mentions in a very fond way about Mark. So even if there was kind of a disturbance on the field, the deal was that John Mark got homesick and he went home to Jerusalem. That's kind of what happened. And then there was a dispute between Barnabas and Paul about Mark's being there. And then he goes with Barnabas. But at the end of one of Paul's letters, one of the later ones, he says something remarkably loving about Mark. Same guy. So could he be the mysterious young man in the sheet? Could be. We don't know. But this is the only place in the Bible where it shows up. Love it. Well, we can make a point about this, and this is a way of actually metaphorically looking at Mark's experience. Let me just run this through you for a second, because I just did this with Malchus, and what I'm going to say is kind of fictional supposition, what I'm going to say now. But if this young man went home totally naked, and he comes in the house, and his parents are there. I mean, it's likely he's young enough, he's still living with his parents, and he comes in the house totally naked. What are the parents going to say? What are you doing? What are you doing? Out in the middle of the night in the cold and the dark, and you don't have a lick of clothes on. What are you doing? Well, there was this thing, and I went out in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it was a rush, and I didn't want to lose where they were going because they didn't say where they were going. And he's got to explain himself. And in the explanation of why he's standing there naked from coming in from outside, somehow he's got to get to the point where he says, well, they grabbed Jesus and took him away, and I decided to follow him, and they grabbed me. And they grabbed me really hard, but since I was only wearing a tablecloth, I slipped out of the tablecloth and ran away, and so here I am. So you mean you went out there to follow Jesus, and then you didn't follow Jesus? Betrayal. He's got to be straight up about the fact that although he wanted to follow Jesus, he was, apart from all the apostles who didn't follow him after the arrest, he wanted to, but he didn't really want to get arrested. So in a real sense, as he comes back and explains his nakedness, he also has to come clean about the fact that he wanted to follow Jesus, but he also wanted to save his own self in the process and left him naked. And it's the nakedness that made him have to fess up to his inevitable betrayal of Jesus. See how that works? So if you take that and you make it a bigger thought, it looks more like this. Betrayal shamefully exposes us. And even for him, I mean, he was shamefully exposed because he was naked, but betrayal itself exposes a really dark side of who we are. And he was shamefully exposed because he lost his tablecloth. But in a bigger sense, betrayal, when you see it happen on someone's part, you see something about their heart that leaves them just as naked. See what I'm saying? There's a connection there. There's a picture there just in this, about the fact that even though John Mark, even though he wanted to follow Jesus, he alone amongst all the apostles followed Jesus close enough that he could get apprehended. In the end, he didn't want to get arrested, so he betrayed Jesus and left. Now again, I'm talking about shades of betrayal because this is a different kind of betrayal. But when you look at that betrayal, you realize that it's a betrayal that is couched in saving your own skin. He may be pro-Jesus when he comes into the garden. Everyone may be pro-Jesus. But then when you're faced with the fact that being pro-Jesus might get you arrested, might get you killed, well, then you go, well, I'm pro-Jesus, but I'm not that pro-Jesus. And suddenly there is in yourself a sense of self-preservation that's more important than your love for Jesus. You see that? You see that thing going on right there? Self-preservation gets in the way of your love for Jesus. And this is where I want to go to on betrayal, because this is what's fascinating about it. In the end, betrayal is so selfishly oriented, it gets in the way of a perfect love on your behalf. So let me just explain what I'm talking about right here, because I summarize it right here, and then I'll talk about it. What betrayal does is it exposes in you an imperfect love. If I say I love you, and I'll die for you, which Peter and all the others did, and I'll go to the tomb, and I'll do, and you say all these things because you're professing your love for that person, it's not until the betrayal happens that you realize that your love is just not as perfect as you thought it was. Betrayal is an insight into the imperfections of your love. You will always betray the one you love. You always hurt the one you love. Well, wait a second. Is that really true? Well, if your love for someone is imperfect, that is, it's not total. If there's a piece of that love that says, well, I'll love you so far, but if it gets to this part over here, the self-preservation kicks in and says, well, I love you, but I don't love you that much. Are you kidding? Like die for you? I don't think so. I don't love you that much. And that's where these guys are. That's where all these guys are. Betrayal is an ugly insight in the duplicitous of our hearts, in the imperfection of our love for other people. If your love for someone else is perfect, it's committed 100% wholly to the good of that other person. But if it's not perfect, there's a self-preservation part of it that keeps you from loving totally. And this is really the message of Jesus through all of this. And I started thinking this way as I'm looking at these shades of betrayal, because in all of these betrayal, in all of them, there's a sense of self that gets in the way of loving Jesus perfectly in all these situations. There's a self issue that comes, it's preservation. And you don't even know it's there until betrayal pops up and you realize, I guess I love myself more than I love Jesus when it comes to this. And in this entire story today, there is a scene where you would expect betrayal, but there's none. And this is what brings you to this idea. Let me go back and show you right here. Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. That sounds like he's beginning to betray the Father, doesn't it? You were born for this, and then you get on the verge of it, and you come to me and say, well, I could get killed. That's what we do when we betray. We say, well, I love you this much, but if it's going to entail this, I don't know. But in Jesus' case, right here, where you expect betrayal to be the next thing. Of course, we've read the story, so it doesn't happen. But this, in a natural sense, this is where it should happen. He knows he's going to die if he pushes on. And then he does something remarkable, and he says, yet not what I will, but you will. And right there, that's perfect love. 100%. The Son's love for the Father is 100%, even if it costs him his life. He'll go to the very end. You see that? That's perfect love. And our love for other people ought to be full and without any self involved in it. It's all about the other person. So when you see perfect love, there is no reservation in perfect love for self. It's always the other. And this is the message of the entire Bible, all the way from Genesis to Revelation, is God's love for us and the love that he wants us to experience, not only from him, but us to replicate in us, is a love that's fully in for the person you're loving. Fully in, not partially in, fully in. Fully in. I could talk a lot about this, but it's all about someone else. So when you talk about perfect love, you're talking about this. When you love somebody biblically, it's not just an emotional, wonderful, kind of tickling feeling. I just feel great inside. I love you. No, biblical love is, I'll use the word cold. That's too harsh a word. Biblical love is a decision of the will to commit to the best for someone else completely. Completely. No reservations for yourself. No selfish orientations in it, completely for the other person. That's biblical love. And when you put it in that sense, you realize, well, who can do that? I mean, who can love that completely? You mean so completely that that I do everything for them, for the benefit of them, for the good of them, thinking what's best for them and not for me. And there's no self for me involved in it. It's totally selfless love. And even to the point of death, you're talking about that? Who can do that? Well, Jesus can do that. And he does it right here. Right on the brink of the worst betrayal in the history of mankind, right here. He does not betray. He loves perfectly. And it's not about himself. There's no self involved. That's what's really something about betrayal. It shows us that our hearts are not all there. Now, he already told him this in Mark 8. I mentioned Mark 8 before. It's the pivot of all of Mark's gospel. Calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to him, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Well, we thought that was just all about taking up crosses and stuff like that. He's talking about love. Jesus so loved us that he was all in. He was all in. So when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, he says, God, if there's another way, I wouldn't mind going that way, but not my will, but your will be done. Total love, totally in, everything for the others, nothing for himself. Selfless. And that's what he said right there. Selfless. Deny himself. So biblically, perfect love is 100% selfless. Now, it's hard for us to love someone 100% selflessly. And when you first get, for instance, in a relationship, and this love starts to erupt, and you feel the tinglies and love. It's mostly an emotional thing. It turns out that the emotion kind of controls you rather than you controlling the emotion. That's what happens when you fall in love, right? The emotion overwhelms you. And then, I've experienced this. You're looking at me like you've never experienced this. And then all of a sudden, you're like a slave to this love. It's like, oh, I'll do anything. You wake up in the morning and this love for this other person overwhelms you. Yeah, and this is about Dorothy. It's about nobody else. But this thing controls you, and you go, oh, and you can't even stop thinking about the other person. And you're thinking about, oh, what would really delight her today? What would be the best thing I could do for her today? I'll surprise her by doing kind of something like this, And remember that time I did that big note on your car? Big piece of paper, and you do crazy things, okay? But the love, the emotion of it controls you, and you're a slave to love, and you're loving every second of it. This is the best thing ever. But what happens when that gets hard to do, or it gets kind of inconvenient? Or worse, what happens when the giggly emotion goes away? Well, I'm really sorry I'm breaking up with you because I just kind of fell out of love. The emotion went away. That's not biblical love. Biblical love is a 100% commitment to somebody else and nothing about you in it. Nothing about you in it. That's biblical love. Because that's God's love. For God so loved the world, he gave his son. That's God's love. And if you want to understand whether or not your love is that perfect, keep track of the betrayals in your life. Because the betrayal is a section of your love that your love's not complete in. You decide to be selfish in that part, and then you usually betray. I loved Mitchell Lynch. I really did. I came to really love him. Really neat guy. But I guess I didn't love him enough that I was willing to be scorned by the same kids in third grade that were scorning him. I didn't want to experience that. So that little piece of the self said, well, Mitchell, I love you like this much. Hey, come on, I walk with you every day. We have great conversations. I don't even notice your tooth anymore. But when it comes to ridicule, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be ridiculed with you. And the only way for me to do that is for me to ridicule you. You see the self in that little piece? Betrayal tells you how imperfect your love is. Because of... What's that?
You didn't love him that much to protect him?
I didn't love him that much. If I really loved him with a perfect love, I would have gone all the way. I would have stood up in third grade and said, Mitchell's my friend. He's a great guy, and shame on you guys for doing that. Right? And to this day, 60 years later, I wish I'd done that. Betrayal is a horrible thing. But betrayal is a way that God allows you to understand how imperfect your love is. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Happened to Peter. When Peter follows through on his betrayal later on, it crushed him. It wrecked him. And he realized, I do love Jesus, but not enough to be identified with him in public. Self. See that? Betrayal is a way that God allows you to realize how imperfect your love is. When it pops up, you're surprised. You're not even self-aware that it's there. You're not even aware that you could do this kind of a thing. Look, in Mark 12 we read, he quotes the great Shema from the Old Testament. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. That's not a selfish reservation in your love. That's an all in your love. That's a perfect love. It's a perfect, all that you are. So when you love biblically, you need to love with all. There's no self in there at all. There's no reservation at the end saying, well, I'll love you until this happens. That's why in the great Shema, this is Shema about, listen, hear, O Israel, listen, this is the deal. There's only one God. You don't have to separate your love between different gods. There's not a God of the forest and the God of the rivers and the God of the fields. There's one God. So since there's one God, you can take all of your love and do him. Go in his direction. All of your love. That's why the all is important. This is why when we do marriage, by the way, the most important portion of a marriage ceremony is the public commitment to each other. And you remember how that goes in the classic cases, right? It says, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness or in health. You're basically saying, the circumstance can't get so bad that I will reserve my love and not love you anymore. I'm saying that this is zero. And so I will love you with a complete and perfect love, even if that means I have to die for you. That's love. And the commitment statement in a wedding ceremony is where you say, that's what I desire. Now, we don't always perfectly do that, but that's the thing. It's why I really hate living together. And I could go on for hours about this. I hate living together because in living together, there is no commitment to stay there. There's nothing. You could wake up the next morning and realize that you left a sock on the floor in the wrong place and the other person's gone. What kind of love is that? They say, well, I love you all the way up until you leave socks on the floor. And I'm out of here. Or you leave a dirty toothbrush on the counter. Or you do whatever you do. There's actually a huge selfish reservation system in the love when you live together. And so it doesn't, and you don't even know how large that selfish reservation system is on the other person's part. You don't know when you're going to cross the line. So what you do is you live in this fear that you're going to do something inadvertent that's it's still who you are. I leave socks on the floor, doggone it. But you don't know when it's going to cross the line, and then they're going to say, well, that's too much for me. I'm out of here. Is that perfect love? No, that's 100% conditional love. And that's not biblical love. Biblical love is an act of the will to say, I am for you, regardless, forever, and for all of me. That's what biblical love is all about. And betrayal is just an ugly little thorn that pops up in your life to reveal the fact that you've reserved something out of your love for yourself. That's what betrayal does. That's what betrayal tells you. So when you look at this, I ask myself through all of this, how did the apostles change? Because as I look at this, when I think of Mitchell Lynch, and I think of other people I've betrayed over the years in a softer way, but I've let them down. I've betrayed them because of selfish issues for me. How did the apostles get over this? Because they all ran away from Jesus, right? Peter's gonna betray him, in front of people that don't even have swords. Well, some there will be. But anyway, there's a betrayal. How did they change? Because in the end, we know in the stories about the apostles, extra biblically, we know that they all died martyrs' deaths except John. Well, what changed? What changed? The cross changed him. Without question. And we have it from one of the apostles that was there. He wrote later on, so we've come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. And by this, love is perfected in us. It's made complete. And then he caps off the whole line by saying this, we love because he first loved us. The self-reserved part of our love goes away when we watch Jesus go to the cross and give all of who he is on our behalf. No reservations, Not, sorry, Jim, I was going to save you, but you leave your socks on the floor. There's no reservations. He dies regardless. He dies while we're yet still sinners. Wow. Really? Yeah. And when the apostles saw that, when they understood that they had all run in the garden from him, they betrayed him by not staying by him. Only one of them seemed to show up at the foot of the cross through all that kind of stuff. They're all behind bushes, hiding and shaking for fear that they're going to get arrested and their lives are going to be taken. Their performance at the crucifixion of Jesus is really bad. They have betrayed Jesus in every sense. They've been with him 3 years. We love you. Yes, we do. We love you. We love you. We love you. Well, again, unless you get crucified, and then we're going to hide behind bushes. And they saw that self-reservation in their love for Jesus, and I think that disgusted them. And then they saw that Jesus didn't have that kind of love. He had a perfect love that he completely gave everything. He gave everything for us. And so John, who saw this happen, wrote this years later and says, that's what changed my love for Jesus. I watched him love me. I love because he first loved me. And that changed everything. And all the apostles realized then when they got under pressure and they're being ridiculed for being followers of Jesus, they say, oh, it's okay. I'm still going to talk about Jesus. Well, we're actually going to kill you if you keep talking about Jesus. Yeah, it's okay. Because I'm all in. My love for Jesus is complete. It doesn't have self-reservation based on martyrdom. It's complete. If that's where it goes, that's where it goes. That's my love. Now, when we extend that to ourselves, there are a lot of situations when you love people, whether it's in your family or whether it's spouses or whether it's children or parents. There's just lots of places. Or it's just a really good friend like Mitchell Lynch. There are places there where you realize that you're weak in terms of your love. What I always ask God in the midst of that, because I know I'm prone to this, and because the first point we made, I'm not self-aware of my capability to do this. I go to God and say, God, I love this person tremendously, and I don't want to let him down, but I realize I'm flawed. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I do not want to betray. I want my love to be this big, complete, 100%, not 99, 100%. God, will you show me how to do that? God, I need you in your spirit in me to give me that kind of love, because now we're talking about supernatural, God-only love. And God, I don't want to let them down. I don't want to betray them. I don't want to let myself get in the way of my ability to love completely this person. But God, and not only am I clueless how to do that, I don't think I even have the wherewithal to get the energy together to do it. But I want to. Because God, I want to exhibit your love to this person. What you're asking for is a total act of your will. God, I want to love in a way that you love, which means it's complete and it's selfless. Not just a little selfish, selfless. That's supernatural love. And Jesus told the apostles in that upper room, they'll know you by your love. They'll know me by your love. They'll know the Father by your love. Because this kind of love you'll display, which you will see me display on the cross just momentarily, that changes the world. You mean there's no conditions on the love I'm receiving from you? Nope, you can do it. You can be a jerk the rest of your life, but I'm still going to love you because I've made it a point of my will that I'm going to be engaged for your best. That's biblical love. And to a hurting world and to a sinful world who receive that kind of love, they're going, well, I want to know where that love comes from. Because everyone in my life up to this point has made their love conditioned on my performance and my ability to do other things. But this person says, regardless, I love you regardless. And that's the love God's called us to do. And in the midst of doing that, you reflect God's love for us. It's commitment. It's whole. It's selfless. You take the selfish part and squeeze it down to zero. And you rely on God's Spirit in you to be able to do it well. And that's what changes the world. That's what changes the world. We love because he first loved us. Okay, I think I'm done. We're going to sing this because I want you to look at these two verses. We're going to sing the first and last verse of this song. We love because he first loved us. Keep that in your head. See what he writes. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. And bad stuff. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee. This is where it gets tough. Help of the helpless. Abide with me. And then look at the next verse. He loves because he first loved us. We love. Hold thou thy cross. That's the example of his perfect love for us. Hold thou thy cross before my closing eyes. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning breaks and earth's dark shadows flee. In life, in death, that's the complete love. Lord, abide with me. Betrayal is an ugly thing, but betrayal in God's hands can expose to you the incompleteness and the imperfection of your love. And it is meant to repulse you. 60 years later, I am repulsed by my betrayal of Mitchell Lynch and my lack of love for him. Don't carry that kind of stuff around the rest of your life. It's bad. Love completely. Love fully. Love selflessly. Ask God how you do it and give you the ability to do it. And he will be glorified, not you. That's how the world changes. Well, okay, I got to stop talking. Father, we look at the cross like we did earlier this morning and we are shocked. We're amazed. And even in the midst of that whole scene as the drama is going down, everyone who had professed love for you scattered and ran away. Their love for you wasn't worth being identified with you enough to get arrested and maybe killed. But after the crucifixion, after the resurrection, after seeing that you gave all for us when we didn't really deserve it, that's a love they never saw before. And Lord, that's the love that we had never seen before. We pray that your Spirit, as you indwell in us, since you abide in us, that kind of love of yours would be manifest in the places we go, in the people that we see, in the actions of our hands even. That our love for others might not be conditioned on any selfish presuppositions on our part. But what about me? But what about me? But what about protecting me? God, we pray that your love would be total, that it would be perfect, that it would encompass our entire life, so that others might understand there is a God that loves you despite all that. Lord, there are people we know who walk around in darkness, as Isaiah says, who sit in darkness in the shadow of death. And they wonder whether or not there is any good news anywhere in the world. And yet here's this good news of the cross, the one who died on our behalf that we might have life. He gave it all. Jesus gave it all. And Lord, we want our love to be the same way as well. We pray that you would be merciful to us when our tendency toward betrayal surfaces, when our selfishness overrules pieces of our love for other people. We pray you be merciful to us in your conviction of us, that you'd use it in the gentle way you do to point out the fact that our love, based on our own fleshly ability to do it, is imperfect, it's qualified, it's not perfect, it's not complete. We pray that you take those embarrassing and disgusting moments and cause us to come to you on our knees and say, God, I want to love better than this. I want to love like you love. Will you love through me among those people I come and see? Will you love through me? So that the world might know that there is a God who loves them. There is a God who's paid the price for their sinfulness. There is a God who wants to draw them to himself if we'll just look at the cross and understand that God so loved the world he gave his son. Father, we are thankful that you've called us to yourself. We're thankful that you gave us eyes to see and faith to embrace what you've done on our behalf. We thank you that you now call us your children, and we are your children. That's just amazing. From where we came from, we're still stunned. We're called your children, and we are your children. And because your son died for us. So thank you for this message today. Amen.